If you're a beginner in Blender looking to expand your skill and experience, then you're in the right place. My name is Josh Bartels with 3 Division, and in the next 30 minutes, we are going to learn how to make this robot from scratch. Let's go.
So let's create a robot. Click and drag or just shift select to select the light and the camera. We're not going to use those right now. Hit X on the keyboard, delete. Hit the number 1 on the 1 pad while your mouse is in the viewport to move to the front orthographic view. And then let's select this cube that we have. And by the way, if you want to move around without changing the plane of view, you hit Shift and middle mouse button to click and drag, or you can hit middle mouse button and click and pivot around a certain point. So I'm going to go back to my front orthographic view, click and select this cube, hit G on the keyboard. Now I can move it. Hit Z to constrain that movement along the Z axis, the up and down axis. And I'm just going to move it somewhere like this. Let's go ahead and duplicate this cube, hit G, Z again, and let's scale it down to be the body of our robot. So this is going to be the head, this is going to be the body. And let's take our head and I'm going to scale it along the Y just slightly like that. Now let's select this object and this one and right click, hit join on the keyboard. So right click, join option, and now they are joined to one another. Let's add what's called a bevel modifier by going over here with this object selected to this blue wrench, add modifier, generate, bevel. Change the size to 0.05, change the segments to 1, or to 2, sorry, right click, shade smooth, and now things are looking pretty good. One more thing I want you to do in this geometry tab though is go to the shading, go to harden normals, and now we're set to go. Let's add our wheel that needs to go down here on the bottom. In order to do that, we are going to add a cylinder. Shift A, mesh cylinder, and then let's rotate this cylinder by hitting the R on the keyboard and then typing in 90. Now it rotated 90, but it rotated along our view axis. So I want to rotate along the Y axis. Before you hit enter or anything else, hit Y and now hit enter, and there we go. We've got the beginnings of a wheel, at least. Scale this down by hitting S on the keyboard to scale the wheel. And then we're going to position it right along the bottom of this robot. I'm going to go to the side orthographic view with the number pad 3, scale it down a bit just a taste, move it up here. I want the pivot point to be just underneath the robot. And that looks pretty good. Let's go back to 1 for the front view and hit S and X to scale it along the S axis. And there's our robot wheel. I'm going to right click, shade auto smooth. I'm going to hit Control and A while this is selected. In fact, let's do it for the whole thing. Control and A, and it gives me this apply option, apply scale. That's important for things we're going to do later, but don't worry about what it's actually doing right now. Tab into edit mode, as it's called. And when you go into edit mode, you'll see that you have access to individual points on this mesh. We don't want to access the individual points right now. We want to access faces. To change to face select mode, hit 3 on the keyboard, and then you'll see that you can select entire faces on this polygon shape. I want you to select one of the round ones, and then this one, shift select that one, hit I on your keyboard, and then let's inset this. This is going to be the center spoke, as it were, of the wheel, and just make it somewhere around in there. And then right click on your tools, and you'll see that we're missing what I'm looking for. I want you to go to edge select mode with this button, or you can hit 2 on your keyboard, right click, and then you get this bridge edge loops option. And what that does is it connects those 2 loops together so that now we have this hole. Now I want you to while you're in edge select mode with the number 2 on your keyboard, hit alternate and select this loop, and shift alternate select that loop, and this one, and this one. And now Control B and drag your mouse out away, and you'll see that you get this option to bevel the whole thing. And that's what we want to do, but it looks a little too sharp. So let's scroll up on our mouse wheel a few times to add a little more of a rounded edge to it. And that looks great. Tab out of edit mode. We're still in smooth mode. That looks good. I'm a fan, and we'll leave it there. Now we have a wheel for our robot. Let's add eyes by adding another cylinder. So add mesh cylinder. Let's rotate this, hit R, Y, 90. That's the wrong way. RZ90, and there we go. Now we're facing forward. Let's hit G on the keyboard, Z to drag it up, G and Y to move it forward, and then let's just scale this down and then scale it along the Y so it's more of a pancake flat type shape. And then we're going to move this in position here in the front of our robot to be our eye. Now I want to copy this across this X axis down here so that we have 2 eyes. To do that, I'm going to select my eye, add modifier, generate mirror, and then let's go to the mirror object and select the head. use that little eyedropper, and there we go. Now let's grab these eyes, kind of put them in position, maybe scale them up a little bit, find where you think the eyes look the cutest and the best, and that's it. I'm going to hit G and Y to kind of pull it back onto the head. These are basically camera lenses that are going to be sticking out of our robot head. Let's go back into edit mode. Let's tab to do that. 3 to be in face select. Select this face, I to inset it, and we're going to create the lenses for this camera. Hit E on the keyboard, and you'll see that as you move your mouse, you can push this face in now. Push it into just in front of that robot cube for the head, and left click. Now hit P for separate, and you'll get the option to separate by selection. That's what we want. And then let's tab out of edit mode again. And now you'll see that we have 2 different objects. This cylinder is an object, and this cylinder is an object. Let's duplicate this one because we're going to need another copy. Shift D and then Y on the keyboard to constrain the movement along the Y. And let's just pull it out in front of that other cylinder we just made. Now, in order to keep these straight, what I'm going to do is go up here to the outliner, and you can double click here to change the name of that cylinder. I'm going to call it glass lens so that we know what it's supposed to be. Now you can also do this by clicking here in the viewport, and I double clicked to access the object behind our glass lens, which is our eyeball. And I'm going to hit F2 on the keyboard now and type in eye. Then let's select this outer side, and I'm going to do metal lens, enter. There we go. Right click, shade auto smooth to make that smooth. And there we go. It's looking pretty good. Now we need to add some arms to our robot. Go to the front orthographic view again, hit Shift and A. And let's get a UV sphere this time, scale it down. G to grab, and then move your mouse up here, place it in there. I'm going to scale it down just a touch more. Right click, shade smooth, and that's looking good. Add a modifier again, generate a mirror modifier. Eyedropper, select the body, and now we have 2 little shoulders. We might want to make them a little bit bigger, but we can adjust them here in a minute too, if we need to. Control A to apply the scale. I'm going to Shift and D to duplicate this, and we're going to get a vertex from this new object. So tab into edit mode with the tab key, hit A to make sure that you've selected all the vertices, and hit this M at center. So M stands for merge. You'll get this merge option, click at center, and now all of your vertices seem to have disappeared, and that's because they have all been merged into one solitary vertex. Hit 1 on your keyboard to switch to vertex select mode, and you'll see that you have a vertex here. Hit E, and we can begin extruding what is going to be this robot's arms. So we're going to make kind of like a noodle arm. So just go ahead and stretch them out something like this, and then tab back out of edit mode. Now, in order to locate this arm right here where we want it, just hit G, slide it into the socket, and there we go. Now, let's make sure we make this a little more smooth. I'm going to hit Add, Generate, Subdivision Surface, and you'll see that it's kind of smoothed out the arms by adding some additional geometry. Now, let's take this mesh. I'm going to apply the mirror modifier and apply the subdivision, right-click, and convert to curve. Now the converting to curve is going to enable us to go over here to this curve menu, slide down to geometry, go to depth, and shift and left click to apply some depth now. Right click, shade smooth, and now we've got a little bit of a noodle arm. This is perfect. Let's change the resolution to 6 just to make it a little more dense. Now let's make sure that we add this fill caps button, and then we're going to tab back out of edit mode into object mode, right click, and now we're going to convert this whole thing back into a mesh, add another subdivision surface modifier to it, generate subdivision surface, and that will smooth this whole thing out and make it look pretty good. So now let's clean this up real fast, switch into edit mode, hit A, M to merge by distance to remove some vertices. While you're in the vertex select mode, select this set of vertices, hit O on your keyboard to ensure that you are in the proportional editing mode, and that's option up here, connected only. Hit period on your keyboard to select this one right here, individual origins. And then what we're going to do is hit S and then scale. And what this is going to do is scale down the size of that end point on the arm so that we have room to connect our little clamps that we're about to connect. To make this easier, I'm just going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to delete this entire arm over here, and I'm going to generate a mirror modifier and then use the eyedropper to apply it to this bottom cube. So then that way we only have to work on one side. Now let's go back to the front orthographic view, hit Shift and A on the keyboard, mesh, we're going to get a cylinder, and we're going to make a claw arm for this thing. So let's go 1 up. I'm going to scale up here, till it's about the size I would want it to be. That looks pretty good. I'm going to scale on the Z till it's down about there. And then right click, shade auto smooth, hit period to focus right on it, and then you can pivot around it. I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to hit 3 on the keyboard, and we're going to just kind of make some quick shapes changes. I here turn off proportional editing, hit ESZ, and you'll see that nothing happens. And that's because you are actually still in the pivot mode that pivots around the individual origins, and we want median point. So in order to make sure that you haven't created any duplicate vertices that are going to cause problems later on, hit A, M to merge by distance, and in this case we're good. So I'm going to tab back into my edit mode, select these two faces, hit ESZ, and then we're going to smash them in a little bit. Let's hit I and inset this. Then I'm going to hit ESZ to scale it up and add a little bit of a middle point there. And then with those selected, Control B, scroll down on the mouse wheel, and you can see our scale needs to be applied because it's not beveling correctly. I'm going to undo that with Control Z, tab out of edit mode, and while we're in object mode, Control A, apply scale, tab back in here, Control B, and now we've got a nice chamfer, and I'm just going to chamfer that edge. That looks good. Let's do the same thing to this edge and this edge. Control B, chamfer that a bit. That looks good. This is going very well. Let's hit Shift A on the keyboard, select mesh, cube, scale it down, grab it, move it over, S, scale down till it's fitting inside of our nice little piece here. I'm going to, with it out, I'm going to select this face by switching to face select mode, and I just switch to wireframe mode, GY, move it out a little bit, E, move it out a little bit, GX to move it over, RS, scale this down. Let's go to vertex select mode, rotate it, scale it down just a touch. And then let's select this whole thing, R, G, and then I'm going to tab out of edit mode, Shift and D, duplicate this, R, Y, 180, and that's going to rotate this. Now we've got another claw, kind of so that we have these two little claw arms. I'm going to select both of them. They look a little big, scale them down in there. Let's see how this looks. Not rendered mode, solid mode. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to select both of these, then select my little pivot point here, right click, join so that they're all joined. And then we're going to grab this and move it up here and just rotate it into position here on the art. So I'm going to rotate X 90, rotate X 180, and there we go. We've kind of got our little claw arms showing up here now. Now we need to mirror this one. So I'm going to go to add modifier, generate mirror eyedropper, select this, and we're good to go. One more thing we're missing is a mouth. We need to add a mouth. So let's hit Shift and A. Let's grab a curve. Let's get a Bezier. Let's hit GZ, switch GY, move it forward, rotate on the X by 90. Let's go back to our front view, and we've got a frowny face. Let's scale it down. I don't want him to frown. Let's make this guy happy. He should be happy to be alive. We have just given him some kind of life. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, and you'll see that these behave differently than vertices. They actually kind of control the whole curve just by the rotation of these points. And so I'm just going to kind of give him a little smiley smirk there, and then tab back out of edit mode, do the thing we did earlier with the curve by going to curve menu, down to geometry, shift and left click to kind of slowly drag to give some depth, hit fill caps, GY to move the mouth right back in front of the face, back to our one, scale it down a little bit. Maybe the depth is a little too much, give him a thinner smile. And there we go. We've got our robot modeled and ready to go. Now we just need to tackle the materials. To begin working on the materials, switch to the material preview mode, and this will give you an option to preview what materials you're adding. Go over here to this little rubber ball looking thing, and we've got this material here that's on by default. I'm going to call this one metal by selecting this word here, typing metal, and then I'm going to change the color down to something a little more gray, something in the value of 0.5 or so, and then I'm going to turn the roughness down here, click on that value and type in something like 0.25. I'm going to make this metallic value 1, and you can use the sliders to get there. And there we go. We've got a metal color. I'm just going to start by selecting everything and shift selecting my cube that's got the color on it, hitting Control L and then link materials. Now this is only going to work if the last material you selected was the one with the gray metal on it. Now we've got metal on our whole robot. Perfect, except we don't want metal on the whole robot. So let's select this one down here, go over here to its properties for materials, hit X to delete the metal, new, and let's type this one in, call it rubber. And then we're going to make this something very black, We're going to keep the roughness up kind of where it is now, and that should do just fine for our purposes. There's our rubber. Now, we also want to have a darker metal that shows up in the scene to give some contrast, and we're going to use that for these lenses right here. So let's start by going to this metal with these lenses selected, and let's hit this duplicate copy button, and now we have metal.001. I'm going to call this metal dark. And then let's select the color and bring the color down to a value of something like 0.5. It's really dark, kind of blackish. And then let's change this roughness value a bit so that it has a little bit of contrast. I want to make this one 0.35. And there we go. Now let's apply this to the mouth as well for now. So metal dark. And then let's go over here and start adding this to pieces of this mesh. To do that, I'm going to tab into edit mode, go to face select and select this inner piece and that inner piece, and then Control plus on the number pad. And it's important, the plus on the number pad, and you'll increase the selection. Now with that increased selection, what we're gonna do is go over here to our material properties panel, hit this plus icon, and now we've got a new material slot. Let's hit this assign button, and now it goes white, but let's select what material is going to be assigned, select metal dark from this dropdown, and now that one is dark. Let's also do that for this outside panel. I'm gonna hit 3 to select face select mode, left click to apply that, and then Control plus and Control plus again to grow that selection until we get right down there to the edge. And that looks good. Select metal dark and click the assign button. All right, that's looking great. Now I want to add a bevel to this as well, now that I'm looking at it. So add generate bevel, and let's make this one 0.00 or 0.02, enter, and let's make it 2 segments and go down to the shading, hard and normals. And there we go. That looks pretty good. I like it. Now we're set to go with that one. Let's maybe change the shoulder pieces to that dark metal as well for now. We might change it later if we don't like it, but for now, that looks pretty good. Now let's work on our eyes real fast. I want to select the eye, that make sure that we have the glass lens selected. I want to hit new, and we're going to call this lens glass. I'm going to change the metallic to 0. I'm going to change the color to something a little bit bluish, just a tint of blue. You'll see where we do more blue here in just a minute. A tint of blue. Let's make the transmission weight 1. Let's make the roughness value something like 0.1 or maybe even 0.05. And that looks pretty good. Now it's very shiny and glassy. I like it. And now let's hit the H button to hide those glass pieces, and then we're going to select this one that says eye, and we are going to switch to the shading panel. Hit the shading button right here, and we've got some special node work to do in order to get this to work like we want it to. I'm going to switch into rendered mode and ensure that I am actually in the cycles render engine by going over here to this camera, selecting cycles, and if you can, switch it to GPU compute, and while we're at it, type in something like 200 for your max number of render samples. Now you'll see that down here we have a little box. Click and drag with the middle mouse button to move around, and you can zoom in and out. This is called the principled BSDF node. It's actually a lot of the same settings we were just affecting for these other materials. But what we want to do is add a new material to this eyes called a gradient. So let's search by hitting Shift and A, just like we would add a mesh. Click search and type in gradient texture, enter, left click, plug the color of that into the color here, which is not working because we actually still have the metal texture applied to it, and that's why suddenly we're seeing a change to the entire mesh. So I want to left click and undrag this. While we've got this here, let's go back over here to the panel, hit new to make a copy, select type eyes, and let's just change the metallic to 0. Let's change the color to white, and let's change the roughness to 1, just so that we can see the difference over here in our viewport. Now with this gradient texture here, making sure that we're affecting the eyes, plug that in, and now it's only affecting our eye textures, which is exactly what we want to happen. I also want this not to be a linear, but I want it to be a spherical progression of gradient. With this selected, hit Control T on your keyboard and you'll get this texture coordinate and mapping node that pops up. If that doesn't pop up, be sure to go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and enable the Node Wrangler add-on. And once you see it there, hit that checkbox and things will be good to go for you. First, I want to do 2 things. I want to go into my viewport and I want to select the eye. I want to hit A. Actually, before I hit A, let's hit Control A to apply the scale. Tab into edit mode, select the whole thing, U for unwrap, click unwrap, and now we've created a UV map of this eyeball. Now over here in the texture coordinates, select this little UV dot and click and drag to the vector dot. And there we go. Now we see that these two things are identical. When it comes to the location, I want you to change this and this to minus 0.5. So click and drag over both of them to adjust them at the same time. Minus 0.5, enter. And now what we've got is a nice bright shiny dot at the center of our object. Now click from this little color and just drag anywhere and let go, and then type in color ramp, and that will add a color ramp node to this whole set. You might have to select everything, click and drag to move it back. And then let's click and drag this into the base color. And now let's begin playing with this. When you move the black over, this little black piece over, you can see it's actually moving that circle to the center, which is exactly what we want. Select the white one and make this something blue, something cool looking. And then let's take this whole setup, and I'm going to twirl down this little emission option, and you'll see there's a little yellow dot down here that says color. Click and drag this color to that color, and then let's type in something like 5 here. And what this is going to do is going to emit light. So we have nice light eyeballs. Super cool. Now with that selected, let's go ahead and kind of play with this a little bit more. I'm going to push the blue in, push the black up, and we want that to have kind of a center point of brightest blue. And that looks pretty good to me. Now what we want to see is how those lenses work with this set. So hit Alternate and H to bring back the lenses that we hid. Now these lenses are not very thick and they don't have any spherical nature for us to use. So what I'm going to do is go over here, add, generate, solidify, and that's going to add just a little bit of solidity to that particular mesh, to this cylinder. Actually, oh, we added it to the wrong thing. I added it to my eyes. So just make sure that you don't have the eyes selected and instead you only have the glass selected. Hit select, generate, solidify, and that will solidify our lens. Now I'm going to tab into my edit mode with my lens, switch to solid mode so I can see the mesh. I'm going to hit I and then G and Y to kind of grab that face and move it out. I and then G, Y to grab it and move it out. Just a touch, right click on the object after you've done that, shade smooth, and now we've got that little bit of a shape of a spherical lens. I'm going to grab it, maybe even move it out a touch now, and let's go back into rendered mode and see how this looks. Now you can see we're getting a little bit of that spherical bend of the light around the edges. Super cool. Let's scale it up just a little bit so it actually kind of intersects with this bigger piece of lens. Let's tab in edit mode on this lens. I'm going to select both of these edge loops, Control B to bevel them to give a nice little edge chamfer to those as well. Tab out of edit mode, and this is looking really sharp. All right, so let's change the look of this little guy. I'm going to go to my material preview so that I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to hit Shift and A, find what is called a noise texture, left click apply. I'm going to Control Shift click it. If you had enabled that node wrangler, you'll be able to see what's going on here. And then with the Shift and left click, you'll see that nothing has happened. And that is because I have not applied this material anywhere on my scene. So what I'm going to do now is tab into edit mode, hit L while I'm hovering over this bottom cube, select the sign, and now that painted metal texture is showing up right here, which is what I want to have happen. Let's scale this down just a touch, and let's maybe add a little bit of detail, something like 5. Then with this selected, click and drag out, color ramp again, and hit enter. We're going to Control Shift click on that one so that I can see the color directly here in the viewport. If that doesn't work for you, just drag the color here to the principled BSDF and you'll be able to see it over here. Just not as well because there's a metallic and other textures on it. Then let's click and left click and drag to kind of spread it out a bit and kind of create more of a contrast. I'm going to actually switch to a constant interpolation mode so that the blend between these things is absolute. And then we're just going to drag it until it's generally kind of everywhere like this. Now this is perfect. This is going to drive the blend between two different colors. So what I'm going to do is find a mix node, search, mix, and then, oh, wrong one, search, mix, and then you'll see color, mix color. I'm going to drop this right here on that little yellow line that goes between the color ramp and the principled. And then let's go back to our principled and see what we've got. Now we can see there are two different colors being splattered over this guy. And this is exactly what we want. We want one set of colors to be one way, the other set to be the other. So let's give this guy this like painted metal look. So let's give him maybe a yellow texture, and let's change the factor to 1. Let's use this as the factor here instead. Sorry, we've got it plugged into the wrong spot. Make sure your color is plugged into the factor, and that'll tell Blender where to put the different colors. And then you could blend between 2 if you wanted, but I'm going to keep this one at our kind of 0.5 gray level. And then the other one will be this yellowish color that I'm actually going to darken down just a touch, or maybe lighten up even. Yeah, lighten up actually is kind of cool. And then let's go to our rendered mode and see how this is kind of turning out. Not too bad. Let's take this same color ramp and I'm going to drag that color option out and look for a bump node. And now you'll see I have 4 options. Let's select height, and it's all the same node, just selecting which of these sockets it's going to be plugged into. And then let's plug this normal right in here, hit Z for rendered. Actually, let's go to material preview. And what that's going to do is give us a little bit of texture here. Like this whole thing is this metal is kind of peeling off, or in this case, we want the paint to peel off. So let's hit the invert to invert the direction of the bump. And there we go. That looks pretty good. I'm liking that. And then we'll use this same map to drive the reflectiveness of this option. So I'm going to grab this and let's go down here into another color ramp. Actually, let's do it this way. I'm going to duplicate this color ramp, Shift and D, factor into factor, Control left click this, change this color from black to a value, and you can use this value option here to something like, oh, let's do 0.25. What is the metal, I guess, over here? The metal value 0.25. Yep. So let's do 0.25 for the black because that's the metal. And then let's change, let's see, let's Control Shift click to see, okay, the black is the metal and the white is the yellow. So black, let's change the metal color to 0.25, value 0.25. And then let's select this other little node down here and change the value to something like 0.45, enter. And now let's take this color and plug it into the roughness map right there, and that'll change the values of the reflectiveness based on each of those materials. Control Shift left click on the principled node to get the final look. And there we go. We've got a robot that's got this like painted wear look to him. And we can take that same material and we could actually apply it up here too if we wanted to see what it looked like on his face. And that's pretty cool. Now let's go back to rendered mode and see how this is looking. It's coming together quite nicely. We could put this painted material on anything else we want. We can also go back in and begin to adjust that noise texture on the painted material to change how it is portrayed on the object. But let's get ourselves a render real fast. I'm going to hit Shift A, get a plane mesh, scale it up. I'm going to tab in edit mode, select this back part, E, Z to give me a backdrop. I'm going to select this, hit Control B, and then scroll up on my mouse wheel to give it a nice little fall off. I'm going to hit Shift and A now to get a light. Let's get an area light, hit G, Z on the keyboard, and then rotate on the X. And let's go back to our overhead view, and I'm going to just move it over here and rotate it so it's aiming at the robot from the back left. Let's scale the size to something like 5. Let's add the power to something like 500, and then let's see how that looks. Not too bad. I'm going to go back to my overhead view, grab this, duplicate it, rotate it around and aim it at my robot from this side, maybe kind of right there. And then let's change the power on this one down to something like 250. And let's go right in here. This is looking pretty cool. I'm going to change the color on this background by, first of all, I'm going to change it to shade smooth. I'm going to add a new material, and then let's just change it to something that has a nice contrast for our yellow here, which would be something kind of in the neighborhood of blue. And let's darken it so that it doesn't, kind of grab the attention from the robot. And it looks like we need a lot more light. So I'm going to select this one, double it to something like 1500, or triple it, I guess that would be. I'm going to take this one and triple it to something like 750. Now we're looking good. Now we need a camera in order to render this. So let's go back to layout so that we have a better view. I'm going to move into something like this angle, grab the whole thing, move it down so that the wheel is actually on top of it. And then let's get this good angle, Control Alternate. Let's hit Shift and A, add a camera, Control Alternate 0 to snap the camera to our view. Hit Shift and the tilde key to kind of just aim the camera. And then let's change over here in the options for our render. Let's change it to 1080 by 1080. I'm going to left click and drag over both of those to do that. And then let's change our zoom here to something like 85 millimeters. And then Shift and tilde just to dial in that position. Let's hit Z and rendered mode. Now we can see what the rendered mode looks like. I think these eyes need to be just a little bit brighter. So let's go to our shading tab. Let's select our eyes. You can double click till you get your eyes. Then I'm going to get this and turn it to something like 10. That looks pretty cool. Let's go back to our map. I might want to bump this light up even more. Let's see what happens if I go to 5,000. I know that's a lot, but let's just bump it up there. Okay, that's too much, but I think we could go to like 2,500. And let's take this one here in the background and bump it up to something like 7,500 and see what that does. That gives us a kind of cool shadow. I think we'd actually go back a little bit to 5,000. And this is looking good. One thing, I think that our noise texture is a little bit stretched. I'm going to hit Control T, and then I'm going to change this from generated to object and see how that works. Not too bad. Let's scale it down and just kind of find a place where the paint peel, it looks kind of cool. And just find your place here with this scale option. And once you get it, we can actually put it right there where it kind of runs into the smile. That's not bad, but then it kind of hides and obscures the smile. But anyway, just find a place where you think looks pretty cool and then hit F12 on your keyboard. And now you are rendering out your own model of a robot. There's a lot more that you can do to it to give it some visual interest, but this is a starting point for you to create your own little robot creation in Blender.
If you have found this helpful, then please do us a favor and hit that subscribe button, and then share your finished renders over in our Discord server. We would love to see them.